Three boys slept through the massacre of an entire family happening 15 feet away, on the other side of a thin wooden wall. It was the morning of April 12, 1981, in Ketty, California. 14-year-old Sheila Sharp had spent the night at a friend's cabin next door. She walked the few steps home, pushed open the front door of cabin 28, and froze. Her mother, Sue Sharp, was lying on the living room floor, bound with electrical cord and medical tape. Beside her lay Sheila's 15-year-old brother, John, and his best friend, Dana Wingate. All three had been beaten and stabbed with such ferocity that a steak knife recovered at the scene was bent at a nearly 30-degree angle, and in the bedroom just down the hall, three young boys, including Sheila's little brothers, were waking up, completely unharmed, completely unaware. But here's the detail that still keeps investigators up at night. Sheila's 12-year-old sister Tina was gone, vanished from her bed, and what happened to her wouldn't be discovered for 3 more years, in a place no one could explain. To understand that night, you need to know who George Sodder was. An Italian immigrant, born Giorgio Sodder in Sardinia, he arrived in America at 13 and built a successful coal trucking business in Fayetteville, West Virginia. He and his wife Jennie had 10 children. By every account, they were living the American dream. But George had a dangerous habit. He said exactly what he thought. And in Fayetteville's tight-knit Italian community, his loud, public criticism of Benito Mussolini made him enemies. Real ones. Months before the fire, a life insurance salesman came to the house. George turned him down. The man's response was chilling. He said George's house would, quote, go up in smoke, and his children would be destroyed. He blamed George's dirty remarks about Mussolini. Around the same time, the older Sodder boys noticed a strange car parked along the highway, a man inside, silently watching the younger children walk home from school. The family brushed it off. Then, in the days before Christmas, something small happened, something almost nobody would notice. Remember this detail. It becomes important later. The fuse box had just been inspected and declared perfectly safe. The crime scene made no sense. Sue, John, and Dana had been bound with medical tape and electrical wire, the kind of restraints that suggest planning, not a random break-in. They'd been attacked with at least 2 hammers and a knife, with a level of violence investigators described as overkill, rage, personal rage, yet nothing of value was taken. There was no forced entry, and most chilling of all, the killers worked quietly enough, or the victims were controlled well enough, that 3 children sleeping down the hall never woke up. Think about that. A fight involving 5 or more people, hammers, a knife bent by sheer force, and total silence in the next room. Or was it silence? When 10-year-old Rick and 5-year-old Greg woke that morning, they climbed out through the bedroom window with Justin, because something told them not to use the hallway. And Justin would later tell investigators he saw the murders happen. Then he changed his story. Then he said it was a dream. Under hypnosis, he described details of the crime scene that hadn't been released to the public, details a sleeping child should never have known. But before we get to who Justin described, you need to know what happened to Tina. For 3 years, Tina Sharp was simply gone. No ransom demand, no sightings. A 12-year-old girl erased from the world on the same night her family was slaughtered. Then, on April 22, 1984, a bottle collector searching near Camp 18, a remote area outside Feather Falls, almost 50 miles from Ketty, found a human skull and a partial jawbone. Dental records confirmed it. Tina. Whoever killed her family had taken her that night, driven her across mountain roads in the dark, and left her in the wilderness. But here's where the case takes its first truly sinister turn. Shortly after the remains were announced, an anonymous call came in to authorities. The caller knew things, specific things about the location of Tina's remains. The call was recorded. And then that tape effectively disappeared into an evidence box for decades. When investigators finally dug it out in 2016, they reportedly traced the voice to someone connected to one of the original suspects. A suspect who had been sitting in plain sight since night one. Because two men were inside cabin 28 in the hours before the murders, and police interviewed both of them, then let them walk away. Marty Smart lived a few cabins away. He was Justin's stepfather, the same Justin sleeping in cabin 28 that night. Marty was a Vietnam veteran with a temper, and in April 1981, his marriage to his wife Marilyn was collapsing. Here's what matters. Sue Sharp had reportedly been advising Marilyn to leave him. On the night of the murders, Marty and his friend Severin Beau Boubaid, a recently released ex-convict Marty had met in a psychiatric facility, actually visited cabin 28 earlier that evening, then went to a bar in Quincy. Both men were interviewed within days. Marty even told police something astonishing, that a hammer of his had gone missing. A hammer. In a hammer murder case. Police gave him a polygraph, called it inconclusive to past, and moved on. Weeks later, Marty left Ketty, and then he wrote a letter to Marilyn, a letter that wouldn't surface publicly for decades. In it, he wrote, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives. 4 lives: Sue, John, Dana, Tina." Investigators would later learn Marty allegedly confessed to a therapist, and that confession, incredibly, was never acted on. But the physical evidence? That was still coming. In 2016, 35 years after the murders, Plumas County Special Investigator Mike Gamberg reopened the case. And almost immediately, the ground started shifting. A hammer was pulled from a pond near Ketty. Its description matched the hammer Marty Smart reported missing in 1981. In 2018, investigators announced that DNA had been recovered from the medical tape used to bind the victims, tape that had sat in evidence for decades. And that anonymous 1984 call about Tina's remains? Gamberg stated the voice was identified and that the caller had a connection to the suspects. Here's the twist that turns this from a cold case into something darker. Many researchers now believe this wasn't a failed investigation. It was an averted one. Marty Smart claimed he was friendly with local law enforcement. Case files went missing, leads evaporated. Justin's hypnosis testimony, where he described 2 men, one matching Marty, one matching Beau, arguing with Sue before the violence erupted, was set aside. Beau Boubaid died in 1988. Marty Smart died of cancer in 2000. Neither man was ever charged. Neither man ever spent a single night in jail for Ketty. Which leaves one final uncomfortable question, the one this whole case turns on. So what really happened on Christmas Eve, 1945? The official story says faulty wiring. Wiring recently inspected in a house where the lights stayed on as it burned. It says 5 children died in a fire too brief and too cool to erase bones that survive professional cremation. It ignores the cut phone line, the missing ladder, the sabotaged trucks, the threats, the strange phone call, and the object Jennie heard rolling across her roof. George Sodder died in 1969, still searching. Jennie wore black every day for the rest of her life and never stopped writing letters until she died in 1989. The billboard came down only after she was gone. Sylvia, the baby who survived that night, spent her entire life, until her death in 2021, convinced of one thing. Her brothers and sisters did not die in that fire. She believed they were taken, possibly by people connected to those Mussolini threats, and the fire was set to cover the crime. 5 children. No bodies, no answers. Nearly 80 years later, the case remains open. So I'll ask you what George asked strangers until his final breath. Where are the Sodder children? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want more cases like this, you know what to do. But here's what nobody tells you. This case is directly connected to something even more disturbing. And that story? It's right here. Don't forget to subscribe. We uncover a new dark secret every day.